I'm never entirely sure whether I missed the warning signs out of sheer foolishness or if I'm just an ordinary person. Sarah seemed very sweet on the surface. She checked all the boxes, even if she was a bit awkward. But then again, most people are awkward sometimes. I tried to overlook the minor quirks because, after all, everyone can be a little weird when they're nervous. Yet, Sarah had an odd quality that, in hindsight, I wish I had taken more seriously. At the beginning, the signs appeared trivial. During our dates, she was extremely hands-on, pinching, playful grabbing, and winking, making a series of hilarious innuendos and constantly flirting on the edge of what was acceptable. I appreciate a woman with a dark sense of humor, and she certainly had that in abundance. However, whenever I attempted to reciprocate, she would pull away, and I realized pretty early that any genuine intimacy wasn't going to happen for a while, and that was all right with me. I wasn't in any rush. Yet she continued sending mixed signals. Almost every night she asked for photos. It wasn't just the usual selfies. She would request full-length shots. I always thought I looked peculiar in those vertical pictures, but she seemed delighted with what I sent. Over time, she made several unusual requests. One night, she wanted a picture of me lying on the floor, eyes closed and arms spread wide. Another time, she coaxed me into doing a striptease with a white sheet, capturing photo after photo as the sheet was slowly pulled down. This went on for about a month. We exchanged images, talked extensively about our desires. It was a kind of kinky, long-distance modeling gig. As a guy, I don't often get to feel appreciated solely for my physical appearance. I usually tie my attractiveness to a performance. It was novel and exciting to feel desired purely for my body. I never imagined I had an exhibitionist streak, or that this was something women generally enjoyed, but she did, and I didn't mind it at first. We continued to meet up once or twice a week for meals, and it seemed like we were building something that might one day become serious. We never spent the night together, and early on, I figured intimacy would take time. Yet one evening, after I sent her a photo of me lying on my kitchen floor, my body sprawled on a white towel, I received a surprise. An hour later, she showed up at my doorstep without warning, her hair drenched and heavy with the scent of alcohol. As soon as she saw me, she grabbed me, guided me to the sofa, and began kissing me passionately. She was very physical, yet everything remained clothed, just heated, intense, but not entirely satisfying. I sometimes wondered if some people are just bad at intimacy, maybe because no one tells them the truth. It was as if she was trying to draw all the air from my lungs. I've had better kisses from my dog, yet I couldn't deny she earned points for enthusiasm. I'd never experienced anyone touching me with such raw intensity before. Still, whenever I tried matching her energy, I got the sense she wasn't really interested in reciprocation. It always seemed to be about her touch alone, never mutual. After about 20 minutes of over-the-clothes fumbling, she asked me to lie down on the floor. I had no idea what she was up to, so I complied. "Can you hold your breath?" she asked, her gaze fixed on me. Suddenly, I felt very small, overwhelmed by a flurry of thoughts. I held my breath until my lungs burned and my head swam, until I could hold it no longer. When I finally opened my eyes, she was watching me with an intensity that frightened me a little. She paused for a moment, taking me in, then said she'd better leave since she had work in the morning. We kissed at the door, and as she brushed her hand along my back, I felt cold. Even though her touch was warm, I thought something significant was about to happen. But then she simply left me standing there. It was confusing and frustrating. I almost didn't call her back, but there was a certain commanding energy about her, a deep awareness of her desires that compelled me to keep replying to her texts. After that night, I found myself lying on my kitchen floor every time she requested a photo. It never quite achieved the same effect of having her unexpectedly appear at my doorstep, yet soon she became a regular presence in my life. I began to hope that perhaps our situation might evolve into something more serious. I looked for signs that she felt the same way, but progress was painfully slow. By the time winter arrived, we had been on and off for 6 months. The only change I noticed was the way she kept holding my hand. Sometimes she would take my cold hand between hers and press it against her cheek, her neck, or even her chest. That was pleasant, and eventually I managed to persuade her to come over for a proper visit to my place. I had hoped that would signal a turning point, but she mostly preferred spending time on the balcony, cuddling under the stars in the freezing cold. She even insisted I give her my jacket, despite offering to fetch one from inside. By the time we returned indoors, I felt as if I might catch pneumonia, and the shock of the warm air left me dizzy. Then one night, she begged me to lie down on the floor again. I was trembling by then. My fingertips felt icy. She returned with a glass of red wine, warming it in her hands, before instructing me to sip and hold it in my mouth, close my eyes, and not swallow. I don't even like wine, and I found her request irritating, yet there was an intensity in her anticipation that was almost infectious. I couldn't quite grasp what was happening. In the past, when I experienced such moments, they often led to unexpected, thrilling encounters. She kissed me, her tongue mingling with the lukewarm wine until it dried messily at the corners of my lips. In one swift motion, she pressed the heel of her hand into my diaphragm, causing the wine to gush out of my mouth and into hers. I started coughing, and she coughed too. My initial reaction was irritation, a mix of frustration and disbelief. All I wanted was a normal, gentle kiss, a small sign of mutual affection. Instead, she left me feeling cold, both physically and emotionally. I almost pushed her away, saying, "Let's not do that again." Though my words came out choked and awkward, she cried, insisting it was nothing, just something different. For a moment, I considered that perhaps she was simply nervous, maybe even clumsy. But I couldn't shake the strangeness of that wine incident. I longed for a normal date, for a genuine connection without the theatrics. Yet, as time passed, I realized I was always the one initiating contact, asking for dates, making phone calls, always trying to move things forward. If there was any chance of something real, I believed she should eventually be the one to reach out. Even so, I couldn't get her out of my mind. Perhaps she was just nervous, or maybe there was something more enigmatic at work. Then one day, she texted me asking if I'd pick her up after work. I agreed. I craved closure, or at least some clarity. In the parking lot of the hospital where she worked, I met her. There she was, sitting on the hood of a car in a stunning red dress. As soon as I stepped out, she took my hand, told me she'd arranged a special date to make things right. Her kiss was different that night, more deliberate, more committed. I sensed that she had finally made a decision, that a threshold had been crossed. She didn't work at the hospital, though. She was taken off to a small red brick building nearby, just 2 floors high. I wondered what she did there. The air inside was heavy with a chemical scent, but at first glance it seemed like a modest clinic. A small reception area with a couple of chairs and a few back offices. It was after hours, so no one else was present. Only a few dim lights illuminated the reception. She quickly disappeared upstairs, saying she'd change into something more comfortable. I waited outside in the quiet, the door locked behind her, and though I felt uneasy, I trusted she was busy. I shuffled around, listening to the muffled thumps coming from above. As darkness deepened outside and fewer cars passed by, the little room felt increasingly isolated. I noticed the door was left slightly ajar, the only door accessible without scaling something. My curiosity got the better of me. I approached and got within 2 feet of the door before realizing it was the source of the overpowering chemical smell. I pushed it open a bit further and, using my phone's light, saw a staircase descending into a dark basement. Occasional thumps from upstairs confirmed she wasn't coming down soon. I took a cautious step down, then another, until suddenly the automatic lights flickered on with a loud thunk, flooding the basement with an eerie fluorescent glow. At first, I was stunned by the sterile environment. White, speckled tiles, countertops lined with silver instruments. One wall featured a grid of metal cupboard doors, and in the center of the room stood 3 steel slabs. One of them was occupied by a vaguely human shape shrouded in white, with only a foot visible at the bottom. The peculiar coloring and texture of its skin made it clear it wasn't simply sleeping, and the presence of a toe tag was an obvious sign. It was a morgue setup. Apparently she worked there, and for our final date, she had chosen that setting. My initial reaction was anger. I wanted to confront her and demand answers, but something inside stopped me. My anger evaporated quickly, leaving behind a horrified curiosity. Instead of storming out, I waited a few moments, ensuring she wasn't coming down after me, and then began descending further. The walk felt interminable, each step echoing my growing dread. I imagined that faceless figure from before, draped in a white shroud, might suddenly rise and pursue me. But the more I descended, the clearer it became that my fear wasn't unfounded. I finally reached a room large enough to examine. The sight of the setup, with the corpse, the equipment, and the scattered tools, made my skin crawl. I couldn't help but recall that bizarre moment when she had pressed against my chest on the balcony, the wine incident, and every odd detail of our encounters. My mind spun with confusion and apprehension. I gathered my courage and decided I needed to leave. I checked the front door. It was locked. I tried every exit, but nothing budged. With nowhere to go, I realized I was trapped in that building, forced to confront a situation I never imagined. I ended up barricading myself in a back room where I could at least observe what was happening without being seen. Hours later, I began piecing together the events in my head. I recalled every request, every mixed signal from Sarah, the constant stream of photos, the strange poses, the odd requests that escalated over time. I wondered if I had been naive, if I had misread her intentions. Part of me wished to dismiss it all as a series of awkward, if unconventional, encounters. But the unmistakable evidence, the way her demands slowly became more intrusive, left me feeling both violated and deeply confused. Then one morning, I awoke to a shocking discovery. As I pulled back my sheets, I saw something that made my stomach drop. A toe tag. My own name was scrawled on it, along with a date of death only a few days in the future. I couldn't believe it. I realized I had underestimated her patience, and that perhaps she had orchestrated this entire series of events to lead to this moment, a final dark twist in our tangled connection. I'm still trying to understand what really happened that night, what I truly saw in her eyes and in the way she handled everything. The police have questioned me, and though they suspect I might be responsible for the disappearance of several people, I know what transpired. I know what I experienced that night, and I know it wasn't just a series of bizarre Tinder requests. It was something far more dangerous, something that I can only now begin to comprehend.